welcome. Today we're going to go through rebinding half of the Bridgerton series. Quickly, we're going to go through supplies that you need and then we'll dive right in. Please like and subscribe, and I hope that you find this helpful. Here are all the things you'll need. Cardstock, got it at Michael's. Scissors, had them at home. Bookmark ribbon and end bands, got them on Amazon. Rolling cutter and Olfa cutter. This is for your book boards and this is for your fabric and your end pages. pH neutral PVA glue, Amazon. See, these are 3D printed spacers. Very helpful, especially the corner cutter one. Brick, 50 cents at Home Depot, just wrapped in book cloth. Mole, get it on Amazon. Pre-cut boards from Hollanders. Book cloth, got it at Book Craft Supply Co. One of these silicone brushes, easy to rub paint off of. And a bone folder, both from Amazon. Lots of parchment paper from Costco. If you want to do an HTV design, you'll need HTV, heat transfer vinyl. This is Sizer brand from Joann's. Cutting mat for your Cricut or Silhouette or Cameo. This is from Amazon. Something to weed. This one was free with a brand that I bought, and some method of ironing it on. I like the Cricut mini press because it's not too expensive. There are bigger ones, but you definitely need something that's flat like this. You can't use a normal iron to iron on HTV. And a book press. The easiest one is just 2 bar clamps and 2 cut pieces of wood sanded down. Okay, let's get started. I did not talk over this, and so when I was doing it, so we're gonna have my voiceover today. Hi, welcome. So the first thing you do is you rip off the cover of books, and I like to use the spines as bookmarks. So you see how I'm sort of like shimmying this off slowly? Another thing that you can do is if you have a hairdryer or a heat gun, then you can put it along the spine to heat that up. I just haven't used our own hairdryer in like 7 years, so do you see how I'm just like slowly, gently ripping it off? Oop, there it goes. And so see, that spine is totally intact, so later when we glue it to cardstock, it'll be a fun little bookmark. And then here we just go fast through the rest of them. And apologies for my little name in the corner there. Here, if I move it, you can see that it was I got the ring light in there. Anyways, okay, so here we go. We are first going to just take off any extra pages that are on the top. I personally don't like having those, like, we don't need those. Yeah, it's fine. Oh, look, I have signed copies. I ripped them up. Anyways, so you get your cardstock and you find whatever you want to end pages. I've already picked mine out. I've got 4 different ones. And then what you're going to do is you're going to measure them. You're going to measure the height of the book, and you're going to measure the width of the book, and then multiply that by 2. So what I normally do is I will just first measure the height of the book, and I'll cut that off first on the paper, and then from there I'll normally just fold the paper in half and then hold it up to the book and sort of do an eyeball measurement of how long the book should be. And I find that that actually is better for me personally than if I was to literally like write each measurement down on the just because I don't know what all the things on the ruler means. I don't like counting and everything, so I normally just mark on the ruler. I find that a lot easier personally. And so once you get what you want, you fold it in half, use bone folder so you can get like a really crisp mark. And then here, as you see, I'm just holding it up to the book, and I'm just gonna draw a line, and then once I've drawn that line, then I'm just gonna cut from that line, as opposed to some people put their ruler down where the line is and they either cut with their X-Acto knife or with the rolling cutter on the text block. I tried that twice. I messed up both text blocks, like cutting into them, so I never tried it again. But it works for some people, so you know, if it works for you, go for it. I just didn't want to cut up any more text blocks because the time I was making my own books, and text blocks take forever to make to begin with, so it just wasn't worth it for me. So this is a method that I find works just fine, and this way you can sort of just like shimmy the piece. If you're not the best at precise measurements, which I'm not, then I think that's a better way to do it. So I just, as you can see, I'm just slowly making everything proper size. So for some, is that too tight? Sorry, I'm knitting while I'm talking over this. That's my new side quest, so to speak. Thank you, Instagram Reels, for teaching me what side quests are. So for this one, I really wanted to have the bee as part of the end paper. But the issue is that the bee was on the far end, and normally I cut off the ends and I just stick to the middle. So this is just showing me marking sort of a better approximation of how to get the bee to be within the end page when I cut it down to size. So that just, this just shows, you know, me figuring out, okay, if the bee is there, where do I fold it in half, and just doing a little bit more math just to make sure that I could get the bee on there. Again, I really like the rolling cutter for cutting these as opposed to using my X-Acto knife, and some people do use their X-Acto knives for that. I don't know. I found the rolling cutter easier. Anyways, okay, so once you have your end pages cut down to size and folded in half, you're going to glue them to your text block and let them let the glue sort of sit in for like 5 minutes or so. So you just put glue, you can either put it onto the text block directly where you see I'm putting these papers down, or you can put glue onto the piece of paper as you see me doing here, about like 3, 4, 5 millimeters of glue, just a tiny bit. And you just sort of push it down along the side. You do the front and the back, and then you just want to let it sit for a little bit before you put your text, before you basically finish prepping your text block. And so the reason I have the parchment paper there is that normally the way that you would do this is normally the way that you would do this is you put the glue on, you put it down, and then you sort of put a weight on top of it. So what I use my book press boards, but I don't want them to get gluey, just in case a little bit of glue spits out on top of, like outside onto the glue, onto the book press board. So that's why I do the parchment paper in between, so it's a little safety sandwich. And I use parchment paper a lot in binding books, a lot more than I think a lot of other people, because I tend to be an overgluer. But I found that it's easier this way to just make sure that you keep your board clean and from glue, and you also keep your cover boards when you're cutting mat clean. I mean, pardon me, but then also your board that's like your cover boards, because there's so many times that when I was starting out, that I messed up on my cover boards because I got glue on them for one reason or another, just because, you know, glue is sort of everywhere when you're making the cover. And so I found that this is an extra helpful way just to make sure that your glue stays where it should be and, you know, not where it shouldn't be. So you just keep doing that for all of them. And then, so when you're making a series, the most important thing is just to keep track of everything. So you're going to mark your text blocks. Mark always on all of your text blocks, always mark which way is up. Mark it on the front cover and on the back end page, as I'm doing, and on the spine. The spine is important for placement of your bookmark ribbon. If you want your bookmark ribbon to be up or down, like coming up from and you want a charm on it, then you're going to glue it to the bottom of the text block. And if you don't care about a charm and you want it to come from the top, then glue it on the top. But especially when you're doing a series, it's really, really, really important to additionally mark each one, so that you know which book is which, because I have actually cased in books to the wrong case because I got distracted by if I had multiple ones. Oh, this looks a lot better. Okay, so the things you need for prepping here, obviously, you have your bookmark ribbon, you have your mole, and you have the end bands. The end bands are those little purple things, and those you cut down to size, just the length of the text block, and the ribbon, you want it to be a little bit longer so it can sort of dangle if you want. And then the mole should be a little bit less tall than the text block, but probably like an inch or more on either side. And then you're going to still trim it down, so you can always go with more to begin with. And then that last thing that I was cutting is just a spine strengthener. It's just a piece of cardstock. And for that, just make sure that's a little bit less than the width of the text block, because we're going to glue that down afterwards. And the order in which you glue them is you do the end bands. Well, sorry. Okay, so you do the bookmark ribbon first, and then you do the end bands on top of them, top of the bookmark ribbon, otherwise it's going to look super silly. And then you do the mole, and then you do the spine strengthener if you want to do a spine strengthener. So then and then I like to use a piece of parchment paper to sort of just push down the spine strengthener, and this way, because if there's extra glue and it oozes out, it's not going to get on your bone folder. These are like legitimately really tight. Okay, and then you just let it dry. Doing a series is just a little bit tedious. Anyways, okay, so now the biggest thing about doing a series is that if you're trying to do it all at the same time. I did Harry Potter over the course of 6 months, and all my books were, some of them were like the tiniest bit not the same height, because I would cut the book boards as I did the books. And, you know, I don't know, I'm human. But if you're doing a series and cut all of your boards at the same time, that way all of your books will be uniform height. And so all you really need to do is just measure one book. And the measurements for this are exactly the width of your text block, so like including now that it's glued and everything, and then exactly the height of the text block plus 6 millimeters. And the 6 millimeters accounts for 3 millimeters on either side, the top and bottom, so when you actually put it into the case, you'll get the tiniest bit of overhang. And so the biggest rule of thumb is to measure twice and cut once. And these are pre-cut boards from Hollanders, and they do custom cutting, which I find so helpful, because when I first started out, I just bought these big sheets, and cutting down big sheets to size it's hard to get the squares. And the amount of like tools I have in like my little tool, you know, trying graveyard of trying to get perfect squares on all 4 sides and right angles from when I just started out is, you know, more than I need, because it's just a lot harder. So I really recommend doing the custom cut boards, because what you can do then is that basically they're just, you get the measurements that I would do for them is you find the biggest book that you think you're going to bind, whether it be a hardback or a paperback, find your biggest one, and then do like 1/4 inch on either side wider than the dimensions of that book, so that you have leeway, and then all of your other books will be a little bit smaller. And that way, then if you already have these boards that are almost the size, you only have to make those 2 cuts, and only having to make those 2 cuts gives you a much better chance of keeping everything square along the way. And so just the shipping is super expensive, not gonna lie. The shipping is a lot, but if you're planning on doing, because I mean you're shipping very heavy book boards, but last time I bought from them, I think I bought like 400 pieces of cut, you know, because I mean I'm doing a ton of books. I'm trying to do my whole library, which I do have a library now, guys. It's over 1,000 books, which means I'm not buying any books this year because I have too many books. But just, yeah, I really highly recommend it. If you're planning on doing a fair number of books, it's going to save you a lot of time. And then this is such a game changer. They are $10 on Amazon. I think it's battery powered. I have never changed the batteries, and I've had it now for a year. look at that, because it just makes such a big, like, silly little mess, but that little vacuum it's everything. I recommend it to everybody. It's linked in my storefront along with all the tools and everything that you need. Sorry, I'm trying to knit while I do this because my hyperfixation is real. And I messed up a stitch. But yeah, okay, so now we're cutting the now we are cutting the spine piece. And for the spine piece, I personally like to, I take my text block and then I put the two pieces of board, the front and back cover board there, and then I take the height of the text block plus one of the pieces of board. So some people just do the height of the text block, some people do the height plus both the boards. I personally like the height and one of the boards. So then I will measure that and cut that. And then you don't have to use a piece of board for your spine. You can easily just use a piece of cardstock or use nothing at all, depending on how stiff you want your spine. If you have a really big book, you're not going to want a boarded spine because it's going to hinder its opening. You're going to want, you know, a piece of cardstock or something that can bend a little bit more easily. But for a book this size, it's fine, and I like the look of having the spine straight like that. So now that you have your pieces cut, you're going to get your book cloth, and I measure just a little bit more. That, I think my ruler there, that's the cork backed ruler, is maybe an inch or so wide, because you want to give yourself a little bit of leeway room. And then parchment paper is key here. So parchment paper goes down underneath the parchment paper goes down as a barrier between your cutting mat and your book cloth, because you're going to be gluing onto your book cloth, and it's going to, if you're like me, it's going to come off potentially, and you want, I'm using a smaller needle, and you basically want to keep your cutting mat clean of glue, because that's the biggest area where you're going to mess up getting glue onto your cut case. So now that I've sort of lined them up, I cut it down a little bit more to size by just taking off on that right side. You're going to see I'm going to cut off just that side piece. Oh, and there goes my flowers. My flowers died halfway through this video, but they were pretty well. They lasted. Peony scenes is the best. But okay, so these little things from Etsy, they are spacers. They're 3D printed. Mine are 8mm normally. I used to use 7mm as my space between the end boards and the spine piece, but these ones were 8, so I just, you know, I've just been using 8 and it's been fine. They just save you a lot of time, and they help sort of square everything up. Before, I was using a T-spacer at the bottom to help. What did I do? Okay, hold on. I'm knitting. Anyways, I was using T-spacer at the bottom as well, but now I just use these, and I just outline, and then I glue onto my book cloth. Some people will glue onto the piece of board and then they put it down. You can do whatever you want. Truly, this is like, there's the basics to bookbinding, and then there's just, you know, you find what works for you, because there's going to be different things that work well for other people. It's, you know, you can make this craft what it is, and I can already see that that's too much glue, but it is what it is. And see, my little pieces get gluey, and so then when I put this down here, you're going to go over it with your bone folder to get, just to make sure that that there's no like air bubbles or anything on the main pieces, but then also you want to use your bone folder to make the hinges nice and crispy. Because crispy hinges, ooh, look at that, they look great. So just, you know, go over, look, I'm finding it there, and then I'm going to go over the sides, and then from there, knitting, knitting, purling. So you just go over it a bunch with your bone folder, and once that I've done that, then I'm going to flip it back over. But the issue is that if I flip it back over, there's glue on that piece of parchment that I just, you know, pushed all my hinges, making them clean. So then you get another piece of parchment. So you do 2 pieces of parchment, and so that when you flip your book cover back over, the purple side doesn't get glue on it. And so now you have to trim down. And so the corner cutter is so the two things that you're going to want are, now that's a 15 millimeter edger. I think I have a 15 millimeter one and a 20 millimeter one. You can use either. Some people also just use the ruler, but I sort of like a thinner trim down edge. So whenever I can find my 15 millimeter one, just most of the time, but not always because I'm messy, I'll use that. And then the corner cutters, those save a ton of time, because if you're just hand corner cutting, you know, like a ninja, that's great and all, but sometimes you sort of overcut, and then when you're trying to fold up everything, you'll have a little piece of bookboard peeking out because you will have cut too much, so your book cloth, when it folds over, doesn't cover everything you need. But with the corner cutters, that never happens. They are designed perfectly to not have that happen to you. So if I could recommend you buying one extra thing for bookbinding, it wouldn't be a Cricut, it would be these tools. And they sell them on Amazon now. I haven't looked at I have an Amazon storefront that just has everything, so you guys can like put it in a cart and see how much it costs for you, or just see like which ones I use or whatever. But when I went to like update it after not looking at it for basically a year, and knitting or crowing, and now those pieces are available on Amazon. They used to just be sold by Etsy sellers. So I mean, if you just want to support an Etsy seller, you do you, but they're also on Amazon now. So but yeah, so these, I can't recommend them enough. So once you cut down all your sides, oh wow, I'm taking a long time cutting these down. I will speed that up. Then you're going to start gluing them. And the most important thing about gluing, like basically it's called like your turn-ins, is you, if you're looking at the case as if you were to put the book in it and read it, like this, you're going to do the top here and the bottom first, and then the sides. And always, it's also important to know to glue basically away from there, because that way you're going off the page, so that glue, it's going up and off, because if you thought about it coming the other way, then the glue could, and your brush could potentially like come in like and onto the book cloth. And so then I fold it up just to get an extra crease, and then I use my fingers to, what am I doing? Okay, sorry. So yeah, so I use my fingers, and unless there's like a ton of glue, then I will probably use bone folder. But you want to make sure your bone folder is like nice and crispy clean of glue. But you really need a very, very, very little amount of glue for this. This isn't like, you know, buckets. This is, you know, a breath of glue. It's like the thought of glue, and that's enough. And so once you do the nice and crispy, like folding up and getting those sides done, then it's time to do the top and the bottom. That's my stomach. So then I pull everything up. And then, so you're going to glue again, but here, then you're going to do something a little bit different. You're going to, before you just fold it over and put it in, you're going to take your bone folder, the pointy end of your bone folder, and you're going to poke in the sort of corners. And I think I'll just show it to you here, and then I zoom in the next time I do it. So just watch, I'm just like poking them in a little bit like that. And then I do the foldy fold and push it over like that. And just like getting them nice and tight. And then on the other side, here I'm going to zoom in, and then you can see what I mean. So just the thought of glue. It's not a ton of glue, it's just the idea of glue. And I get it up in the corner. And then you take your bone folder. Then see, I'm just like poking just a tiny bit. It's just like a little poke. It's not huge. So a little teeny tiny poke, and that teeny tiny little poke just makes it that when you fold it over, the edges don't pop out. I'm purling this stitch. Okay, so once that's done, I'm gonna press it. And here's the thing, is that I have a second set of book boards. It was from the original press that I made, and they are bigger. They're, I think, 17 or 18 inches wide, and those are ones, so here it'll go over with the bone folder. And those are ones that I use to press my cases. And the reason there's parchment paper there is twofold. One, in case there's any extra glue that's like popped out, but also these boards, they could have been treated with some type of oil or something. And so this way, putting a nice clean sheet of parchment paper like on either side of it protects any oils that are potentially in these boards from getting onto your case, because now that you've spent time, you know, cutting your boards and gluing them down and all that, you don't want to ruin your case with like wood oil. Anyway, so that's just gonna go and do its thing and dry. I press it normally for a couple hours or overnight, and then you go and you design whatever design you want for it. And I did that in Design Space, and I've got tutorials on that I'll put a card up above to, you know, do that. And then so then you get your, this is the Cricut section. So this is HTV by Caesar, I can't pronounce this thing. But anyways, then you cut however much you need. And so that's me cutting, counting like I'm, you know, 3, because I never trust myself. So I normally double count, and then you take your HTV, and that's a mat that the film has been taken off of. My mat's a little dirty, but honestly, it's fine. So you just basically, there's a sticky part of your mat, and so you line up your HTV with the sticky part of the mat, and then you just sort of roll it down. And yes, there's big bubbles, but we'll get rid of them. So you just sort of spread it out, and then use your bone folder and just sort of go over it. And you'll see all those little dots on it. I'm pretty sure those are, I don't know, dirt, but it cuts fine. So that's just it cutting in the pencil really fast. And you take that off and do that 5 more times or 4 more times. So there were 4 books that I made. And then I personally like to cut them each into their front and back and title pieces. Some people lead on the mat, and personally I think that's insane. If you do that, you go for it. But it's sticky, and I like to be able to just like work with it here. Anyways, so and I'm gonna put some music on, stop talking at you, and you can enjoy me weeding, or you can fast forward. I'll put maybe this could be like your new pimple popping, you know, whatever. Okay, so after that lovely quiet time, I sometimes lose letters when I'm ironing on or weeding, and so this way you can just basically print another one out and then just iron it on after the fact. But just always remember that when you're ironing, that your iron can't touch the vinyl, so this is why we put on the parchment paper. Before we dive back into our bookbinding tutorial, I want to take a moment to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. I recently went deep down the rabbit hole of yarn crafts, as you can tell from my slightly distracted voiceover, and have begun to learn to knit and crochet. I asked for recommendations before I remembered I had a Skillshare subscription and checked there. They have lots of amazing beginner classes that I found incredibly useful. Skillshare is the largest online community for creatives, offering thousands of classes led by industry experts across various fields like illustration, graphic design, photography, music, marketing, productivity, and more. Whether you're a beginner or advanced, Skillshare has something for everyone, allowing you to go from a dabbler to a pro in just a matter of hours. What sets Skillshare apart is its learn by doing approach, where you can create and share projects after completing a class and get feedback from the community. Plus, with its on-demand platform and stackable lessons, you can learn at your own pace no matter what your skill level is. This month, Skillshare is focusing on the idea of treating creativity like a muscle that needs regular exercise. Just as we prioritize our health and wellness, let's make 2025 the year we dedicate more time to our creative pursuits. I, for one, am excited to try a lot of different new artistic outlets this year. Skillshare is here to help you make that choice to learn, grow, and nurture your creative practice. By consistently working on your creative skills, you can achieve personal and professional growth in ways you never imagined. So, if you're ready to flex those creative muscles, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today and take your skills to the next level. Okay, now comes the last part. It's called casing in. So it's basically the process of taking the case that you've made and that you've ironed on and attaching it to the text block. So now that you have everything glued and ready to go, then if you want, this is sort of when you trim down your mole. You can keep it bigger if you want, but I like to trim it down sort of like an inch or so, and sometimes you can do a little sort of like triangle cutting like I'm doing right here, but you don't have to. That's just personal preference. And so when you're doing this, and especially when you're doing this with a series, just triple check everything. Make sure that your text block is facing the correct direction. Make sure that you are gonna glue the correct case to the correct text block. Because as I said before, I have messed this up on more than one occasion. So that's why it's really helpful, especially having the arrows, because that's just like a quick way to see. And then I like to number them. So I just sort of numbered the series, or, you just write it down. Because that piece of paper right there that has the arrow on it, it's thick enough that you're not going to see that through. Once I glue this down, you're not going to see any of that writing because it's going onto the back of that page. So anyways, what you do is you need to put a piece of scrap paper down between the end pages. So you're going to glue under the mole and then over the mole, and you're going to glue off the page. So this is, again, we talked about with the gluing. You're going off the page so that no glue gets stuck under this piece of paper. And I like using the big brush because you can get a lot on, but then it's really easy to just sort of swipe it all off. And so see, I'm getting glue off the page. That's okay because it's not getting under, so it'll be fine. So you just glue and glue. And then what you're going to do is you're going to get rid of this piece of paper very carefully, and you're going to put a clean piece of parchment paper in between these two pages. And that is so in case when you close this down, so you close it and you sort of roll it down, no glue comes out. And if any glue comes out, then it's not going to get onto the other page, the other like side of the end page, and so it won't stick together. So when you're all said and done and the book's been in the press and it's dried, it will open clean and it won't sort of rip the end pages. Because I've had that happen before when I was just starting, because the glue as an overgluer. So this is just to make sure that you have a nice clean book when you're all said and done. And for me personally, the way that I case it in is I line it up. I line up the text block within the case and sort of shimmy it around, making sure that both the top and the bottom has eyeballing about the same amount of space. And I push the text block, when the case is closed, I push the text block all the way to the back. So it's basically touching where the spine would be. And then I open it like this, as you can see, do the gluing. And then what I do, my way of casing in, is just taking the cover, rolling it down, and being done. I call it good. Some people, they'll now at this point, they'll flip the book over, they'll open up what they just glued down, and they'll take the bone folder and they'll go over it, just making sure that there aren't any creases and just that everything's like nice and crisp. Every time I've tried to do that, I mess it up. I've said it in previous videos, but this is, I think, the 5th different method of casing in that I tried, and this was the first one that worked for me without completely getting really crinkly, wrinkled end pages as an end process. And so for me, this is just what works. And so I fold it up, and then, like I've said before, just wrap the whole thing in parchment paper in case there's anything on your boards, any kinds of oils or anything on your boards, so it doesn't stick to your brand new cased in, weeded, iron-on cases. And then you just put it in the press. And the biggest thing about when you put it in the press is just make sure that the spine is poking out so that you don't squish or break your spine. And then now here, really quickly, I'm just going to show you how I turn those spine pieces of the cover into little bookmarks. And that's really easy. Basically, you just take it and you're just going to cut them off. And this, I can see how these I think were some of the first ones that I tried to do, or I thought about it after the fact for doing them. And so these are a little bit wonky, but basically, if you were to do this, I'm cutting way too exact right now. Cut bigger than you need, because what you're going to do is you're just going to cut these, and then you're going to glue them to whatever cardstock that you want to glue them to, that you want as the opposite side. And you're going to glue them and you're going to press them. And then after they've been glued and pressed, normally I think like overnight or just for a couple hours, honestly, just a long enough time that, because the spine piece, as you can see, already wants to sort of curl up because it's so thin, because it's not the normal thickness of the front or back cover. It's just sort of like this thin piece because of the way that you've pulled it off. There's still a lot stuck on the spine of the book. So basically, you're just going to cut whatever piece you want at the other side, and then you're just going to put them on parchment paper. Parchment paper is key for this, and you're just going to glue. And on this, it's totally fine if the glue goes over, because I'm just going to see how I'm just sort of making another little parchment sandwich. That's fine, because the whole thing is just going to be protected with parchment, and you're going to let it glue, and you're going to press it flat. And then once you've done this for all of them, you press them all flat. And then this is the next, let me see. What is this? No, I'm making the last two. So I'm making the last two, and they're just going to go like that, press flat, dry them. And then the next day, this is the next day, I'm just cutting off all that excess. And so this is when you sort of trim them down the sides, which is why it's fine for them to be bigger when you're cutting them off the covers, because this is the end point when you trim them. And then they're just done. And here's the final product of everything. Here's all 4 of them. I did a little something different on the spines of these. I really like how these turned out. Oh, there's my bee. See, it came in. Thanks for following along. I'm sorry this was chaotic, and half the time I was obsessed with my knitting, but I'm slowly getting better at that. Please remember to like and subscribe if you found this chaos helpful. Most of them are not this chaotic, and I hope to see you around. Leave any questions in the comments, and I will get back to you.